All right. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for those of us joining from the East Coast. Welcome to the fifth installment of our Infinite Insights series. We do have a few newcomers in the audience today, so just want to give you some context at Who Knew It. We typically do a customer conference each year in the fall where we kind of take a few days to step back away from our day-to-day and talk about data strategy and optimizing our environments and our data use and really exploring different ways to deliver insights and promote data literacy in our organizations. So in our new reality, we made the decision to transform what would be our annual Infinity Conference into more of these sort of bite-sized, digestible sessions that our community members can fit more easily into their schedules or watch on demand. We've had quite a few on-demand viewers, so thank you for that, and cover topics that are really aligned to the challenges we're dealing with right now. So big welcome to new agencies joining us, and welcome back to many of you that I know have tuned in each month or watched on demand and shared in these discussions. So we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us and invest in your data strategies and really share your ideas with the broader community. We have an awesome audience of both kind of a mix of data leaders representing both kind of the assessment and accountability teams, as well as some technical and information services folks. So we're really going to try to tailor some of the questions that we pitch to our special guests and the topics that we covered today to make it relevant for your roles. So it should be a really great mix of perspectives. Most of you are from districts, but I know we do have a few state education agency partners joining us too. I believe Indiana and Shane from Hawaii is joining us. It's so funny, I have to take a side note. Shane and I chatted a little bit after the last Infinite Insights webinar, and I didn't realize until that moment that this is 6 a.m. Hawaii time. So they always have a representative on. I hear they get a lunch if they're the designated person. So unfortunately, we already had this scheduled, but we may adjust as we look at the 2021 calendar. So Shane, good morning. I hope you have your coffee and your breakfast in front of you. And we'll jump in and get started. So I'm Andrea Gromberg. I lead marketing and communications here at Who Knew It, and will serve as sort of the host for today's discussion. We have a great agenda lined up. So how we've designed this is really to take a step back, kind of take a breath at the chaos that was very intense planning over the summer. Kind of transitioned into one of the most unusual, tense, in some communities, political, and really emotional back to school season, probably that you've seen in many of your careers, and really reflect a little and take another deep breath, because this isn't over, and we have a lot of planning to do to figure out what this looks like moving forward in our new reality. So for those of you that have joined us the last couple of months, our structure is going to be a little different today. Our agenda is going to focus on kind of these three topics that you see on the screen. First, we want to take a look at what returning to learning looked like across this Who Knew It community, how our systems and our staff and students are adjusting to sort of the plethora of learning modalities that we're all conducting. What's new, better, different than what the school closures we experienced last spring brought us. And we are actually going to administer a poll so we can hear both from our special guests and from you as well. Our second topic we want to tackle is our approach to assessment. So this is super top of mind, I know, for me personally right now as a parent. We actually just got the assessment results back from my 7-year-old, his math and ELA NWA map results. And it's really interesting. Our district is really going through the same cadence as they've done in years past, but their reporting strategy is very different. So in past years, we would have got, kind of the high level directional RIT score and compared that across the year. And our district took a really different approach and from a parent perspective, went very granular into the skills, a report that I hadn't seen before, and basically presented back a skills checklist, right? What he's mastered, what the plan is for how they're going to personalize his instruction moving forward in the coming weeks and months. Just a really great example of how a district took a similar assessment sort of administration and the logistics approach, but a really completely different approach from the data side. And I'm really excited to hear from all of you of what that approach has looked like in your districts. And then lastly, we want to take some time to look a little bit, as much as we can, into the future. So, what types of data are you working with today? Where are you getting requests? How, is your state's accountability impacting your work? And then even on the logistics side, kind of how has all of this sort of redistribution of data impacted your data journey in general, your work with Who Knew It? And I know many of you are in implementations right now, right? So you're sort of dealing with that checklist, as well as I'm sure different data requests that you're seeing. So we definitely want to hear all of it. So for each of these topics, we're going to start out by asking the audience a question related to each topic via a poll in the Zoom tool. And this will help kind of ground us in terms of where we take the discussion. And then we also ask you if you have specific examples or ideas that have worked within your districts or education agencies. We encourage you to use the chat feature and tell us and really share these out with the broader community. And even if you're feeling really brave, we'll also have you jump into the panel if you're comfortable with that, and even share an idea that worked, so we can really benefit the full community. So throughout today's discussion, we also encourage you to ask questions. So if you have a specific kind of clarifying question for the Who Knew It team or for any of our special guests, definitely use the Q&A feature right in the Zoom tool. We'll be monitoring those questions and comments and incorporating them into the discussion where we can. And then we'll also try to save some time at the end to specifically address Q&A from the audience. And then moving on, wanted to introduce you to two internal folks. Sarah Singer, our head of customer success. Give a little wave. She's going to actually do some stage setting. So as we go through each of these topics, returning to learning, assessments, and then kind of future data use, Sarah's going to reflect a little bit on the industry as a whole and kind of our Who Knew It take as an organization, and as well as what we're hearing across our customer base. So excited to see and hear Sarah's perspectives. And then Courtney Stevens, Courtney, if you want to give a little wave, our VP of Education Research, is going to be our moderator today, who will actually be queuing up specific questions for our two special guests from district partners that you see on the right-hand side. So I'll first introduce Lee Baird from Desert Sands. Lee, if you want to give a little wave. And maybe just share a little bit about your organization and your role within Desert Sands and the sort of where you are in your data journey with Who Knew It.
Sure, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here today. So Desert Sands is a school district in Southern California in the low desert near the Palm Springs area. We're actually centered in La Quinta. We have about 28,000 students right now, so a mid-sized district. And my role within the district is coordinator of assessment and accountability. So I oversee all of our state testing, a lot of our formative assessment processes as well, and anything data related, with the exception of our state reporting, I should say, pretty much comes through our office. So if any of our district leaders, principals, anybody needs anything specific, they're going to give that request to us, and we're going to weed through all the raw data and figure out a way to provide them what they need. So based on some of the requests that we've been getting over the years, we've realized that our system is just a little bit old and archaic and doing everything, through Excel. And we really needed a system where we could streamline our data, And so we were excited when we first started to see Who Knew It at some of the different conferences out there, and investigated and, brought out the team to share with us. And we realized that Who Knew It was going to meet so many of our needs. So we're about a year in right now. I think we actually did our first training to administrators February of last year. So we have rolled out essentials, not to our teachers yet, but to all of our district leaders, and are working on building student success. And we're just happy and excited that we finally have our own data warehouse and a platform where we can go and really have a more streamlined process for accessing data.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lee, and really appreciate you being here today and sharing your perspective.
My
And I
pleasure.
believe, Frank, you are on as well, Frank McCormick, from Sunnyside Unified, one of our newest partners. Frank, share a little bit about Sunnyside and your role and the work that you're doing with Who Knew It.
Good morning, everybody. So we are in Sunnyside Unified School District in Tucson, Arizona. We're the second largest school district in Southern Arizona, with just over 15,200 students in our district. And we are a one-to-one K-12 district. We adopted technology integration fairly aggressively about 10 years ago. That's when I came on board to the district team. And, we are brand new clients to Who Knew It, but we're not new with the concept of data warehousing or data dashboarding. We've gone through a couple of different vendors, and we always kind of fell short with those vendors because of the desire for customization and the desire to kind of build a resource that wasn't driven by the engineers and the developers' concept of what we needed, but was driven by our concept of what we needed. And that's why we're really excited to join with Who Knew It, because of the high level of flexibility they have, and the level of customization that's available to us in controlling and visualizing our data.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Frank. Really appreciate you being here and excited to dig into some of those use cases. All right, so on to our first topic, reflecting on returning to learning. So we want to kick things off today with a poll. So I'm going to have Nicole. I'm not sure if Nicole's on video. Should introduce her. She's our the logistics around all of these wonderful events that we do. So if you take a couple of minutes to share with us a little bit about what the learning models look like in your districts today. Maybe while that poll is going on, I'm actually going to hand it off to Sarah to kind of set the stage for us, and then we'll go back and take a look at our poll results.
Great. All right. Well, again, name is Sarah Singer, Head of Customer Success. One of the things I was reflecting on in the current state here is how different our experiences are across the nation right now as we deliver K-12 instruction. And so this is a map it's an interactive map produced by Education Week. I actually encourage you to go play with it. It's quite fun. But what you'll see here is that there are areas, for example, like DC, where full closure, and when I say closure, I mean sort of full like online learning, has basically been ordered across all of DC. And then you juxtapose that against places like Texas, or states like Texas and Florida, where school districts actually are required to stay open and in person for those families who want in-person service. So, and then we have Oregon and California, I think Hawaii, where they're sort of under a partial closure mandate. And then what you have is a bunch of other places, the vast majority of states that are under sort of like no order. It's sort of been, the decisions have been pushed to be more local or county-based. And I think what's interesting about that is that it actually aligns with how the K-12 education industry, if you want to call it, is run in the United States. So if you compare that to like the international scene, a lot of actually most international K-12 systems are significantly more centralized. And in K-12 in the United States, it's more decentralized, right? And so just, with that landscape and that context, here comes a pandemic, here comes COVID-19. And now we see, not surprisingly, different places around the country doing different things. So this is both a drawback and an opportunity. I'm always people make fun of me for being kind of Pollyannish and two glasses half full kind of person, but I'm gonna do that and say the cool thing about this opportunity is that we get a chance to see a whole bunch of different things and potentially learn from them. So and this is and I guess on the drawback side, it does leave a lot of responsibility and sometimes chaos as we all try to plan for the moment, right? And so, we have Education Secretary DeVos, who's basically said that last week, she said it's not the responsibility of the federal government to track school districts, to track COVID infection rates, to tell districts, to tell states how they're reopening. And so most states have pushed this decision to their local districts or their local counties. So with that framing in mind, I'm really excited to hear from our panelists as well as all those participating in this call, because I want to hear what life has been like for you all as we all kind of experience this differently. So, and here is the results of the poll.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So not surprising, it looks, I think everybody can see the poll results push. So we've got about 53, just over half that's fully distance learning, and then just under half that's hybrid. So that's really good context, and I think aligns with what you'll hear from Lee and Frank in our examples today. Again, I want to give a plug. If you, as we're talking and as Courtney is queuing up these questions, if you guys have an idea in the audience or something that's worked really well for your district, we definitely welcome you to chat those in, and we'll be happy to share those on the call. If you want to raise your hand and join into the discussion, we welcome that as well. So I will hand it off to Courtney, and we'll dig into this.
Awesome. So here's kind of what our next steps are going to look like. Since we have a couple of people, we're gonna, and it's a nice small panel, we're gonna spend a little bit of time digging into desert sands, and then we're gonna shift gears and spend a little bit of time digging in to everything we have going on in Arizona. So I'm gonna kind of pass it off to Lee. What I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, Lee, is kind of where are you guys at in terms of the model that you're currently using? How is that different or the same as kind of where you guys started off last year? Just talk a little bit about kind of how your school year's gone and the journey from last spring to here.
Absolutely. It's funny, I was actually chatting with some of my colleagues the other day, and I was saying, this is just such strange times, and it feels like we've been in the same school year now for about 3 years. Because, we've just been continuing on full speed, trying to meet the needs of everybody. And anyway, so I think many of us will be looking forward to maybe a holiday break this year. But anyway, as far as our journey, we shut down in California on March 13th of last year and went full distance learning not too long after that. It took California a little bit of time to get to that point. We started off with creating an internal list of instructional resources that we could share with our families. So, our kids were home, they didn't have teachers, in the beginning of all of it. And, as we were figuring out what we needed to do and what was required. And so the first thing for us was, let's just make sure we have resources to help keep our kids engaged and to help our families who don't have those resources. And that was our first priority, which we put out there. And not long after that, getting some guidance from the state on distance learning and continuing to get guidance. So yeah, we've been in full distance learning since then. and always planning on what is it going to look like when we go to hybrid. And what we realized very early on is that before we could really do any planning on what our hybrid model would look like, we really need more data. We need to know what our families' preferences are. We need to know if they're even wanting to bring their children back to a school setting, if they want to stay in distance learning only. And then we have to think about our staff, and our staff that have their own medical needs, or they're taking care of people at home who have medical needs, and they're a caregiver. And what is just their personal preference, working through distance learning, the distance learning model, or in a hybrid model. And we had surveyed our staff towards the end of last year to get some data, and we had surveyed families as well. And as we were starting this school year, we realized, we really are struggling to work off of old data. We really need new data because so many things have happened and so much more guidance has come out. And, in California, we have this color tiered system. And for so long, we were in the purple, which was the worst stage, and then we moved to red, and now we're back to purple. And anyway, so just always shifting, and we're always having to stay flexible, and we're always having to keep up with our county and state guidelines, of course, but at the same time really wanting to make sure that the needs of our students are met. And so what we are doing this year, does look different than last year. Last year, our state pretty much came out with guidance that, we're going to hold students harmless for this particular situation. So our graduation rate probably went up a little bit. But I don't know that the student engagement was where we wanted it. We were anticipating a learning loss just simply because of knowing that our students in the classrooms weren't all engaging. And many of our teachers were really struggling last year, especially some of our veteran teachers that weren't too tech savvy. We're fortunate in our district because we are one-to-one. We've been that way for years now. We even have our own LTE network. So students that don't have Wi-Fi at their home are still able to access the internet through their devices through our own district LTE network. So we're very fortunate that we had the resources to be able to move forward into a full distance learning model without any restrictions with technology. But at the same time, getting the kids and keeping them engaged, and having our teachers feel comfortable with the new technology, where they're not seeing kids face to face, and they're seeing them through Zoom, and they've never set up a Zoom session in their entire life. And many of them have never used Google Classroom. So at the end of last year, we have an amazing team of 4 technology project facilitators who were holding training sessions more as a survival thing, more than anything, to make sure that our teachers have resources that they need, and moving into this year, really having a planned, training calendar where the week before school started, there was, a whole 5 days of just trainings on Google Classroom and Nearpod and Zoom and Seesaw and all the different, resources that our teachers might be using, but also at the same time limiting the resources that our teachers would be using. That was feedback that we received from families after the spring, was there's too much going on, and all different teachers are asking our kids to do different things, and it's too confusing, and we need things more streamlined. So that's something that we were mindful of as we were creating the training schedules, to really say, okay, you need to focus on these particular resources specifically for your distance learning platforms. So that's been very helpful. Of course, having a little bit more accountability for our students in that they're actually earning grades this year and not just a pass. And who knew it has been so amazing with that. We now have trimester and of course quarter grades in the system now, and I take that back. Trimesters aren't in there, but the quarter grades are in there for our secondary schools. So our principals and APs have been all over that data, looking at, you know, what's the DF rate, you know, being able to compare that to last year, something that we were not able to do just a year ago. So the timing of you know, adopting Who Knew It has been very opportune for us, in that we're able to monitor so many more things, especially our attendance. You know, we're a Synergy school district. That's our SIS, and pulling attendance reports from Synergy has always been quite challenging. So having some easier to read, user-friendly attendance reports through Who Knew It has been a game changer for us, especially since we've lost our 5 attendance facilitators at the district level this year, and the oversight of attendance has gone back to the schools. So having that easy access to data has just been huge. So we've been able to really target families who aren't engaging the way that they should per our state guidelines, and so that's been huge. But more so than anything, knowing that we need to take our families and our staff needs and wishes into account. So we're in the process now of gathering updated results on what their preference would be when we do go to a hybrid model. So we should have that data pretty soon, and be able to move forward with creating some schedules, a hybrid schedule that will work for our needs. We really want to keep things consistent, where our different high schools and elementary schools, middle schools, all maybe have different bell schedules and different periods in the day. We really want to streamline that moving forward, and in a hybrid model where everybody really has the same schedule, so that there's true equity. And we've been struggling a little bit with our scheduling, you know, in the sense of, number one, we don't have all the data and all the numbers yet, which are coming. But at the same time, what do we do about our specialized groups? And we want to make sure that our students who are in hands-on CTE programs have the ability to go into the classroom and continue with that hands-on. But what if the teacher has, you know, a distance learning preference or need? And those are not answers that we can easily, that we have solutions for at the moment, but we're working on that, and working with our unions, of course, to make sure that that we're meeting everybody's needs. So that being said, we've also reopened registration for our families. You know, our students register at the beginning of every school year, and we are asking them to re-register. And families are going to need to tell us, do you have a preference of distance learning or hybrid? If they don't respond, then they'll automatically be put in a hybrid program. And those that do stay in distance learning, the goal is to keep them at their current school with their current teachers, but knowing that depending on how all the numbers play out with students and teachers, and, you know, do we have enough to cover these classes at these schools, that, you know, we may have teachers that have to transfer. We might have, you know, temporarily for the school year, you know, until this whole situation's taken care of. We're working with the union on an MOU with that, and it looks very promising to be ratified. Some of our families might have to have some of their students take courses through an online learning platform like Apex, because they may not have a teacher who is available at their school to teach a particular course. You know, our families are going to have the option, if they do stay in distance learning, do they want to go to our, you know, K-8 independent, or excuse me, homeschool program? Do they want to go into our secondary or our high school independent study program? You know, we have a lot of options for our families because of the size of our school district, which is nice. But at the same time, hoping that the numbers are all going to work out when we get our survey results back, that there's really going to be minimal movement, and we're going to be able to meet the needs of everybody without too much disruption to their lives. That's really our ultimate goal in our planning to reopen. So our board has had a couple different meetings to discuss. Well, it's been an ongoing discussion, of course, but 2 formal meetings. with regards to opening up to hybrid. During the first meeting, they agreed to table the issue because it looked like we'd be going back into the lowest tier in California. So that being said, they just recently voted at the last meeting that our small groups, our most specialized groups, our students that have needs, such as our students with disabilities and EL students have, they can start coming back onto campus in just a couple of weeks. The issue is do we have teachers who are willing to come back with them in person in a hybrid model? And do we have teachers at every school? Are we going to have to transfer students to meet those needs? And again, we're really in that planning process right now and don't have all those answers, but soon. We're in that data gathering phase at this point. And then it looks like tentatively we're coming back into hybrid at the semester in January. And of course, health guidelines and state guidelines, county guidelines, all in place at that point in time. But things look much better than they did in the spring. Lots more ongoing PD to support our teachers. A lot more collaboration, which is wonderful between different departments. As crazy as all of this has been, there's been a lot of positive things that have come out of it as well, as far as communication and collaboration and transparency. And it's really nice and refreshing. So I know I've taken way too much time. I'm sorry. So
you're good. No, we've enjoyed hearing the story. And I think, as Sarah mentioned earlier, there's definitely some silver linings that have come out of, kind of the crazy, where we've had, some tech infusions and some learning curves, and just, we've had to kind of deep into the pool in some areas where we traditionally don't like to do that, with change moving that quickly through school systems. So I appreciate you sharing so much. I know Frank's story will look and feel a little bit different. Arizona is not a union state. We have associations. So some of the challenges you guys are facing in California, we just massage a little bit differently in the Arizona area. So Frank, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your district as well, and just talk a little bit about kind of where you've been and your journey to get to where you are now.
Right. I would just love to listen to Courtney continue to use the polite language that she's using to describe the state of Arizona's guidance on this. I think that was masterful. That was very, very well put. Yeah. So, obviously we are in very much a similar position to what Lee described in terms of going back to last spring. Our closure order came down right after our spring break, right at the start of, quarter four, like most places in the country. And, it just became, we adopted a very similar, model that Lee described, which is, we weren't going to punish any of our students, for lack of progress during quarter four. We had a maintain and improve grade policy, which is that our students couldn't drop lower than the grade that they had when schools closed. They could improve on their grade, but obviously they couldn't go lower than their grade. Senior or high school students who are working towards graduation would continue to, get credit for the work that they did, in progress towards graduation. And we were just going to take the quarter to obviously figure out what we were going to do. Everyone had to just get their bearings. Parents had to figure out how they were going to manage. Students had to figure out how they were going to manage, and we, as an organization, had to figure out how we were going to manage in this situation. And it just became very evident, from our standpoint, that we weren't going to get a lot of guidance from the state, that the state wasn't really going to, be coming to the rescue on this, that, their position was, as Sarah was saying earlier, reflecting, Secretary DeVos's position, that, this is for you guys to figure out. We're not here to help you, which is a little disappointing when you see other states, where they have departments of ed and organizations that are very proactive, and do make a big effort to kind of, reach out and help schools figure out how this is going to work. So, that being said, we had some distinct advantages, I think, over some other school districts. And one of those, as I alluded to at the top of the session, is that 10 years ago, our community was kind enough to pass a bond for our district, which we used to really build an infrastructure for one-to-one learning, which means that even prior to COVID, every single one of our students in the district in grades 4 to 12 had a designated device that they were checked out at the start of the year and that they kept with them all the time. They took home with them. It was their device to keep for the entire year. As a result, we were much better positioned when schools closed to pivot to a distance learning type of model because we didn't have to deploy devices to a ton of students. The students already had the devices. We didn't have to do a massive lift in terms of training and in terms of, teacher prep because teachers had already, for the most part, been utilizing the devices. They had developed digital spaces and, and a learning management system and ways of, interacting with the students digitally. So, where other districts were, playing the scramble game of trying to purchase hardware and getting put on the waiting list and the back orders for, Chromebooks and iPads and everything else, we were fortunate enough to not have to do that because we had previously already made that investment. So that was nice. That was one headache and one burden that we didn't have to shoulder where other districts, did have to deal with that as a challenge and as a problem. That being said, obviously, there was a mountain of other problems and other issues that we have to think about and consider when we basically adopt a completely new modality for instruction, which is unprecedented in the history of education. And by the way, you've got 4 months to do it. So, these aren't problems that are unique to us, obviously, but, there was a lot of things that we had to consider, when it came down to these. And one of those was really having an understanding of where our families were, where our students were, what their capacity was to be able to engage in this learning environment, to be able to do the work. There was we couldn't afford to make a ton of assumptions about, preparedness and where people were. We really needed to collect some hard empirical data, to back up some of our decision making as we moved over the summer into the first quarter of this academic year. We knew very early on that we would not be opening. We knew very clearly that this would not be a normal school year, that this would not be business as usual. So, we really had to, bring in lots of different members of the team, lots of stakeholders, everyone from parents, student advisory groups. We brought in teacher advisory groups from every single content area, principals, administrators, everybody to brainstorm over the summer. How do we do this in a way that's as effective as possible? Right? So one of the things that we determined very early is, well, we have to make sure that we have a system in place for gathering information for our parents, and allowing parents to provide us with input concerning what types of educational structures they're most comfortable with, because we know at some point, even though we're starting the year remotely and every single person at the start of quarter one was remote, we knew that at some point in time, we'd have to transition back to a hybrid model, and that it wouldn't just be the doors are open on the campus and everybody come back to normal. We knew that there'd have to be this bridge process. So trying to think about what that bridge process would look like, what that hybrid model was going to look like was huge for us, and gathering as much information and data back from parents, completing surveys about, what teaching models they'd be most comfortable with, what transportation needs that they might have, what current needs they might have in terms of Wi-Fi connection. Just under about 12% of our students in this district live in an area of the county where there were no cell phone towers. So not only did they not have hardwired cable to their homes, because the local cable providers didn't even have a wired infrastructure to provide broadband internet or Wi-Fi service to those homes, but they couldn't even get a reliable Wi-Fi signal out to those areas, which goes back to just sort of inequities in internet service and inequities in infrastructure. So, we had to think about ways in which, how are we going to provide, service to those communities that don't have service while the county chases the ball a little bit and tries to get a cell phone tower up in those areas. Fortunately, they were able to erect an additional tower, and another one's going up very soon. So, service out in those areas should be improved and should be a little bit better. But, these are the kind of things, these are the kind of conversations that we have to have. There are huge equity concerns when it comes to learning in these environments and learning in these spaces. And it's forcing these conversations, which I think are really important conversations to have. So, whether it was, designating our buses, our school buses as mobile Wi-Fi hotspots and parking them in various areas so that we could provide internet service, dealing with the challenges of providing lunch programs and food programs to a lot of our parents and students who really needed that. It really required us to think creatively, think outside the box, think about a lot of the different ways in which we needed to meet these challenges. Another big area that we knew was going to be an issue was taking the temperature on social and emotional learning. The emotional toll that the lockdown was having on families, on students, the isolation and the lack of interaction with other people and other friends and social groups. And we knew that that was going to be a huge factor in student learning as we brought students back first in a remote space and then thinking about a hybrid space. We had to bring in our intervention teams, our psychologists, our counselors, all the folks that deal with emotional support for students in the classroom and in the campuses, and really think about how do we take the temperature of what's happening at the various grade levels with the various groups of students to see if they're emotionally ready to begin the learning process. So developing surveys and developing assessments for students to take as they came back in was a very big part of our planning process. Another element that we knew was going to be critical was gauging our teachers' readiness to be able to do this work. As I said before, we all know that this is a completely different teaching modality, and all the teaching courses and all the teacher training programs that you go through, none of them would ever prepare you to do what it is that we're asking teachers to do over this past 9 weeks. This is not how normally we do education, but we have to figure out a way to do education this way. So, a big part of our discussion over the summer is even though our teachers have had, technology in the classroom, even though our students have had technology in the classroom, it's always been used as a support piece or as a support tool within the classroom, right? It's not distance learning. It was within the classroom. This is different. This is completely different than that. So the discussion, was really around how do we make sure that our teachers are ready to do this work, that they have the tools that they need. We've provided lots of different resources for them. Every single teacher has a laptop. Every student has a laptop. We have a learning management system. We have, various assessment tools, whether you're using Nearpod or Pear Deck or, any, Edpuzzle or various other, types of assessment tools that are designed kind of for, gathering information in a remote space. Those are out there. We've provided those for teachers, but do we know that teachers are ready to utilize those effectively? Do we know that teachers are ready to manage a classroom in a Meet space, in a Google Meet space, which is what we use? So, again, we don't want to just assume that because those tools and resources are there, that people understand them and know how to use them. So one of the things that we identified early on is we were going to have a kind of assessment that we built at the very start of the year, which all of our teachers were going to deliver and all of our students were going to take. I'm going to put a link in the chat right here if you guys want to take a look at it, because I have the archive page right here. And this is what we called our digital driver's license for our younger students and our road to remote roadmap for our older students. And what this was all about was putting out a kind of basic overview assessment for all of our teachers to develop and all of our students to take, which would tell us two important things. One, it would tell us which teachers were prepared to deliver content in a remote space. Which teachers were prepared to be able to utilize video conferencing and breakout rooms to facilitate small group discussion. Which teachers were prepared to effectively post assignments within their learning management system, or collect assignments in a digital format rather than a print format. It would tell us, which teachers were ready to manage students in terms of interacting and enforcing, netiquette rules for, appropriate discussions and appropriate conversations within a digital space. But in addition to telling us, whether the teachers were ready to do it, it will also tell us whether the students were ready to do this. It would allow us to gather data to, ascertain, are the students prepared to do this work? Can they turn in an assignment? Can they use their device to take a screenshot and annotate that screenshot and turn that into teachers? Just basic stuff, that really allowed the teachers to then gather that evidence of learning, depending on what their specific learning goal might be. So this was really, really helpful to us from the standpoint of, being able to say, okay, who's ready to do this? Who is sort of tentative about doing this? And who might need a lot of additional support? And by gathering those data, we were able to develop additional support plans for, groups of students who, might be challenged with this. We were able to better identify immediately, what hardware systems might need to be improved, whether it was purchasing additional mobile hotspot devices to check out the families and provide the families to allow them better connection, whether or not we needed to provide additional parapro, additional special education supports, language supports for certain groups of students, who were challenged with interacting within the classroom space. I mean, all those different conversations that we know are so critical during the course of a normal school year, there's still issues that we have to face in a remote space. They don't go away. They just become, more pronounced, if anything else, and we have to then say, okay, we know these problems and these challenges are still here with us. How do we then address and target our resources to where they're most needed based on the data that we've collected?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love listening to both you and Lee kind of talk a little bit about, that gathering of data and how important it is from the community side, but then also just the internal resources, right? Like who knows what and what do we need and where are we at? And, being able to understand our as is so that we know kind of what our path moving forward looks like based on all these changing conditions at any moment. And both of you talking about needing to update and continue to have those, flows of information coming so that we can target and on task to really do what we can to use our resources in the way that's necessary. And I love, thank you so much for sharing that the digital driver's license. I love that idea, around just, and it leads really nicely into our next topic. So we didn't plan that, but I appreciate it. Talking just a little bit about that sense of assessment and, how are we tracking what kids know and can do and what resources and supports they might need when so much of, our normal flows of gathering that data are no longer open to us, at least for right now, kind of with the new sense. So I'm actually gonna plop us back to Andrea. I think we're gonna gather some more information from our panel or from our whole attendee group about kind of where everybody is at currently with assessment. So we'd love it if you take a second. It looks like it just popped up on the screen. And just share a little bit about what your district is currently doing in terms of how you're managing, understanding what kids know and can do. And then I think Sarah's going to jump back in and share some more thoughts with us.
Yeah, so if you want to just take a couple moments to answer, it's a two-parter question. And again, if particularly if you're answering the I don't know and kind of a mix of both, we'd love to dig into examples. So definitely feel free to use that chat function. So maybe while folks are administering the or answering the poll, Sarah, if you want to take us through a little stage setting on kind of what we're seeing across the community.
Sure. Glad to. All right. As you all know, historically, I think it's safe to say that assessment has dominated, I think, our landscape in terms of what data we consume in K-12 education, and also the student outcomes that we measure. Starting all the way back to NCLB specifically, and then came along ESSA, and that I think did move us towards a broadening set of data that we all look at, and including things like finance data, maybe some per pupil funding. We started to see the CRDC data sets around discipline, harassment, bullying, that kind of thing. But at the same time, there was still and still has been a large focus on assessment. I think how we kind of looked at that assessment data has shifted maybe more towards growth, or at least moving towards growth, as opposed to just proficiency. And so that was kind of where we are, say last February. And then, then we have COVID-19 hit, and we literally cannot administer at least summative assessments in the spring. So there goes that major data set that we've all come to know and use. And so with that, we begin to see, I think, more data, like an even more comprehensive set of data, including that around social and emotional well-being and participation and student engagement. And the other thing I would just say about assessment in general is even now, and I'm curious to how people react to this, but what I'm starting to see is even those districts on assessment who've issued formative assessments right now are questioning the validity of some of the data they're seeing back. I just talked to one district yesterday who is administering assessments, and they really doubting the validity of their grades K-3 assessments. And they literally said, this person said, I think our first graders have come in at 5th grade reading levels. So maybe online learning is working that well for their first graders. That could be one conclusion, or maybe there's a little parental help or something going on at home. And so we're seeing a lot of that kind of thing. So even those who are administering assessments kind of wondering a little bit about how much stock to take into them. And then when I think about the participation in student engagement and social and emotional well-being, I can just, personal story, but I have a 2nd grader at home, and every 2 weeks we get sent a survey as family, and they say, how are you feeling? And there's like, do you need to talk to your teacher? Do you want to set up some time to talk to your teacher? And we get that every 2 weeks. And then I talked to my daughter about it, and she's like, yeah, actually, I really would like to talk to the teacher. And I was like, well, why? And she said, I just want to get to know her better. And that was what she said. And so like that kind of, to me, is like, it's a data point. It's a broadening of data points, a little bit different than some of the stuff that we've seen in the past. And so, with all of that, I'm curious to hear about, especially from our panelists and our participants out there, how, if this is mirroring your experience, if you're also looking at different data sets, broadening them, and how that's playing out for you.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And we just published the results. So it looks like the majority of folks are administering some form of assessments, but it does look like it's leaning more on the formative side, or a mix of formative. The folks the 16% that answered, I don't know, I'd love for you to share some of that in the chat, because love to take a look at what data that you're looking at on a student level. All right, Courtney, back to you to jump into the panel.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. We've got a couple of things we want to touch on before we're done today, but I want to maybe circle back, Frank, to you. You mentioned a little bit about kind of the social learning piece, adding into kind of the data you're collecting and thinking about that component in addition to more traditional assessments. I know you shared a little bit, but revisit real quick, maybe in the context of thinking about student learning and how it is, your district is approaching this idea about just understanding where kids are at in general. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so part of this, is that by collecting the social emotional learning data, by by being able to gather information regarding sort of where students are at, it informs our decisions and our discussions in a broader sense when we go to, for example, create master schedules. When we create a master schedule for remote learning, it becomes very clear early on that a key component of that can't just be the face-to-face instructional time, but we actually have to create spaces within the schedule built in to where students know that they have a resource to go to and speak to somebody, at certain periods during the week, where they can get support, both emotional support, academic support, just standing office hours, for our students to, know that, during this time, this is available. I can go and talk to somebody. I can set up an appointment, or I can check in with somebody. I can become part of a support, network, a support group, where we're having maybe small group discussions or one-on-one discussions with students who might need particular supports, particular, help with. Maybe it's just something as simple as time management, or organizing their work, to hold themselves a little bit more accountable, to build that agency piece to where the students are accountable for their own learning. But maybe it's, more of a consistent, scheduled and preset meeting where I check in, regularly every couple of days or so with a school psychologist or a counselor or somebody, who I can trust and talk to. And building opportunities for those discussions into the calendar, into the actual master schedule, to make sure that we're thinking about those things and we're not just kind of plowing through a schedule just to get the seat time done, that we're taking into consideration those other factors and those other needs that students might have.
Frank, how are you guys approaching just more traditional assessment? Are you guys formative and summative, and then kind of how is this kind of shifted? Are you approaching it differently in addition to the social emotional learning, but with the actual more traditional assessment and with kind of the somewhat choose your own adventure nature of the state of Arizona? Talk to me a little bit about kind of what you're thinking longer term with assessment in your space.
Yeah, obviously, it was very clear initially that we were going to have to kind of scale back our normal expectations in terms of how much assessment we did, how much we covered. But, we also realized that this is where bringing in teachers bringing in, academic and curriculum content specialists, they were really going to be, the drivers of what that looked like in the various content areas and the various subject areas. I mean, clearly there were certain assessments which couldn't be avoided. We had certain states, mandated assessments, our Zella language testing, assessments and those types of things, which have to get done. And we just had to figure out a way to make sure that they got done. It was challenging, but we were able to figure it out and able to do it. And that information obviously is very important because it tells us, from a language and literacy standpoint, which students are prepared to, work independently and which students need additional support and how we move them to a place where they can get that support. So some of the assessments were non-negotiable, but other ones, we're fortunate enough to, have developed over the last few years a lot of open educational resource material and a lot of curriculum units that are curated internally by our curriculum writing groups, not purchased content, not bought from a publisher. So, it's not as if, they're saying, okay, well, here's the unit and you have to do the assessment this way. And you have a formative assessment at the beginning and a summative assessment at the end. And, it has to, go through the scripted model. We had a lot more freedom and flexibility to really discuss and talk with, the content experts at the various grade levels and the various subject areas to say, okay, we know that pacing is going to be off. We know that things are going to be slower than they normally would during a typical school year. We need to be thinking about what are our priority elements? What are the elements within the content that are really key towards measuring student growth and measuring student progress? And how do we cut to that, how do we get to that place to where we're building strong relationships with students initially we're developing that classroom culture that really asserts the importance of having those structures in place. And now, how do we then develop assessments that really tell us whether or not these learning goals are being met? So, in some cases, it looked very similar to what it may have looked previous, but, maybe just with a slower pace. So, in areas like ELA and history and social studies, we have unit assessments that come at the end of the completed unit for the quarter, whether it's a writing piece or, some kind of presentation piece that's scored according to a rubric. If it's a math class, we have units that touch on very targeted and specific objectives. And, there's still a summative assessment that comes at the end of that unit that allows the students to be able to communicate if the learning goals have been met within that objective. A lot of it is just kind of getting teachers to wrap their head around what assessment looks like in a remote space. We had a lot of teachers who were very concerned about, the issue of integrity and students cheating on tests and cheating on assessments. And of all people, it was my son, who's a freshman in college, who kind of put that in context for me, because he was saying, he was going through a very similar thing, with his college courses and his college classes, saying, all the professors are requiring that the cameras be on and that, they see your desk, to make sure that your desk is clear and you're not cheating. And, he says to me, he goes, Dad, he goes, anybody can just hold their cell phone out, 2 feet to the right, and no one's going to be able to see whether or not they're on the Wolfram Alpha app cheating on the math test. He goes, if we want to cheat, we're going to cheat, right? There's no way you can stop somebody, from doing that in this space if they really want to do it. So the question then comes back around to, what are we really assessing? If the questions that we're asking within an assessment are questions that a student can Google the answer to, are those really good assessment questions? I mean, maybe we should be thinking more about the type of questions that we're asking if a student can cheat that easily by just pulling up their phone and looking up the answer. So it's an opportunity for us to really question and really think about what data we've traditionally collected and how effective that data has been in terms of really indicating for us whether effective learning is happening or not. This is an opportunity for us to really think about, or question a lot of the natural assumptions that we may have had over time about whether or not effective learning is happening. And then obviously lots of other data collection in lots of other areas, just transitioning back to hybrid. We just started, last week with hybrid learning and actually having students returning to the campus in pods, in small groups, in rotations, and being able to communicate out to parents and collect information back from parents to confirm that they understood the rules and that they were ready to support students in a hybrid space. Just confirming that parents understood you can't come onto campus if there's any, check on a student and their temperature is elevated or there's any symptoms or signs. You have to be prepared to, we're going to pull that student, we're going to isolate them and pull them from class. You have to be prepared to then have that student come home. Just confirming all of those accountability measures that are now required, to learn in a hybrid space, and that and confirming that all of our parents understood what return to campus meant in terms of their support of those policies.
Yeah, no, it's just so many more balls in the air in terms of juggling in addition to trying to figure out what kids know and what they can do and what we need to learn. So it sounds like, your district took, what you've been doing, and like you said, look, your more traditional ways of doing things to really kind of check for alignment, but also to just see if they pass the common sense in terms of, should we do this, and really getting us what we need. I know just a little bit, I think in Lee's district, Lee, you guys made an assessment shift this year, right? From SBAC to iReady?
Yes, we did. We've actually been kind of in an ongoing evolution with our assessment strategy for a couple of years now, working through an assessment audit. We've had some pretty significant change in our educational services leadership, and really starting to look at our practices, and are they current and are they relevant, and what data do we have? For so long we have been focusing so much on our end of year state assessment results to really get a dipstick of where are our kids, what do they know, what can they do? And we're using those end of year assessments, whether it be CASP or LPAC for our English learners. And what we've come to realize is that so many of our schools were doing other forms of assessment that they would choose to do, and this school's doing IR, and this school's doing Dreambox, and this school is using Lexia, and we didn't really have anything consistent district wide to really be able to do any true progress monitoring at a district level to see how our students were learning throughout the school year. And not only that, but what areas do we really need to focus on in order to best prepare our students for our end of year summatives. So last year, several of our schools piloted iReady, and a decision was made to go district wide with that this school year. And it's interesting because that was a very controversial decision last year, because our principals, of course, they don't like being told what they have to do. And no, you can't use Lexia anymore, and we're not going to help you fund that. We're all using iReady. But now that we do have something consistent, they are so thankful for it, considering the circumstances that we're in, because we're able to get a measure of where each school's students are. They're so competitive, and how are their kids doing compared to the kids at their neighboring school, and so that's been helpful. And all of our students have participated in the ELA and the math diagnostic to get us started, so that the kiddos can get started with their intervention lessons. And the teachers are thankful for that, because they're not having to just figure things out anymore as far as their response to intervention. They're being given tried and true proven research-based lessons to help support students to bring them up in the areas where they're lacking. So what wound up being very controversial, and a couple of our principals were just pulling their hair out about the fact that, what do you mean I can't use Lexia and Dreambox anymore? It's wound up being a very good thing. So really helped us with district learning. And as we move forward with it and get additional diagnostic results, of course, getting a better idea of how our kids are doing and learning through distance learning, and be able to compare those results and the growth with the results that we had from last year, at least from the first diagnostic to the second. We never were able to administer the last diagnostic last year to our pilot schools, but having enough data at enough schools anyway to be able to give us an indication of is that progress similar, on par, or is there more of a learning gap than we expected, just based on looking at some of those preliminary results. The only other methodologies that we had previous were district benchmarks that were teacher created benchmarks, which we kind of had spotty buy-in throughout the district as to whether or not those results were even meaningful, or if anything was ever done with them. It was kind of I have to give this, let's check a box, let's move on, and let's never look at the results. And so we're seeing some very different results as or practices as a result of iReady, and excited that we're in the works on getting that into essentials. We're still waiting for our last data file to get in there, but so we can't quite dig in completely yet, and we're excited to see everything in there when the rest of the math scores and the domains are posted. So that's been incredibly helpful for us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So all sorts of great stuff going on with assessment. And I know we have one last topic we want to hopefully kind of glean the knowledge or your as is from your districts as well. So I'm going to pass this back to Andrea for one last poll.
Yes, if you want to take a few moments to answer the poll question, we've sort of queued up a few of the big themes that actually Sarah's gonna talk a little bit about. But we'd love to hear kind of your take on these, and if there are others, definitely put those into chat. We'd love to hear from them. So maybe while we're running the poll, Sarah, if you want to give a little context, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about data that we believe, based on what we're seeing with our customers, that are data sets that are growing in importance. And so the first is around enrollment data. And specifically here, unfortunately, we are seeing declining enrollment across many districts, in part because families are pulling their kids out. And so as we all know, that has an impact on our overall budgets, and therefore has huge impacts to kind of the district infrastructure and operations and planning. So that's kind of one bucket. Another bucket that we're seeing is around student equity. And this is we have seen persistent and pervasive opportunity gaps in the past across various student groups. And those gaps, I think the prediction is that they may be exacerbated as a result of the pandemic, largely due to, I think, access issues, but also potentially some engagement issues and things like that. So that's another, just the notion of student equity, and really needing to focus on ensuring that we're getting equitable outcomes. And that we know that may require differing amounts of inputs to get those equitable outcomes. Engagement, we talked a little bit about this already. I would say there's kind of the student engagement piece, and especially in the context of a digital learning world, and understanding through sort of learning management systems and that type of thing. Are students engaging? Are they logging on? Are they participating? I might even add a little bit here about parental engagement or family engagement. Just one thing, the personal story here, in my daughter's district, they actually record the morning meetings and then the class sessions. So I've had the opportunity to watch what happens in class. And I will tell you, this is back to me being silver lining Sarah over here. But like the idea that I can see what they're learning has actually helped me engage better in my child's learning. So for example, they're learning about the commutative property of addition. 8 plus 7 is the same as 7 plus 8, for example, if you've all forgotten the commutative property. And they have a little sign where they go like this. Anytime anything's a commutative property, they kind of do this thing with their hands. So I've begun to do that at dinner and that kind of thing when I'm talking to my daughter about the commutative property. It's just a fun little way for me to engage. And that's about parental engagement again, but I think student engagement is a dominant theme here. And then last is health and wellness data. This is I think a pretty new domain as a result of this pandemic, that's becoming more and more like top of mind, looking at wanting to know things like vaccination rates and things like that. And even sort of mini contract tracing for the current situation. But as you can imagine, as health and wellness as a data domain opens up, there's other possibilities too. Talked to one district who was brought their wellness staff in, and they were actually interested in tracking concussions. Not something I had thought about, not right now, but like longer term. So these are different data domains that, by themselves, I think are interesting. And then the real power is when they all kind of come together and you can form a kind of a comprehensive picture using a variety of data domains and sort of how they all relate to one another. I think that's the real power. With that, I will hand it over.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. That's awesome context. Let's take a quick look at the results. I'd love to see where folks are thinking in terms of some of these data domains. So Nicole, if you want to push the poll results, that would be awesome. All right. Looks like engagement is the clear winner, but a lot kind of across the board. So you'll definitely see these themes in our future discussions. It's definitely the data themes that our product and engineering teams are kind of grappling with on the roadmap. So it's awesome to see, and no others, which is good. We're on the right path. All right. So we have a few minutes left. I'm going to pass it back to Courtney and maybe just collect some final thoughts from our special guests.
Yeah, most definitely. So yeah, it is nice to see we've been working closely with the number, with all of you that are on the call. Actually, most names, I think I know everybody but one of you that's on the call. So I'll have to reach out to say hello. But it's nice just to kind of see that those same data elements, and I love the partnership, that we kind of heard from both Lee and Frank in different ways today as well about, engaging back with the data platform to really make sure we're pulling in the data that's relevant, and as those things shift and ebb and flow, really making sure that we stay engaged so that we are supporting you with what you need in order to help kids learn and to support your staff in that process as well. And so, as we mentioned before, I don't know if you have any last thoughts, Lee or Frank, just around, we know we're grappling with all the same stuff we always did, plus now we're adding in some, interesting additional layers, right? Because things weren't hard enough already. But is there anything specific that you guys are looking at in your district that really feels like a strong shift, in terms of data that you're needing right now, that you haven't necessarily paid strong attention for? We know, who has a device, some of the access issues is, new data for all of us, important in different ways than it's been up until now. But just talk a little bit about, is there anything coming, or is there anything that you've been really, really working with strongly that you want to just kind of mention as we close out today? I think Frank, you started talking and you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So I tend to echo what Sarah had mentioned earlier, in that optimism is an intellectual choice. And, I see a lot of opportunities here, where I'm not trying to be overly sanguine about, how wonderful things are, because we know that, it's very challenging for a lot of folks, a lot of teachers, a lot of parents, a lot of students, that this is a really challenging environment to work in. But this also allows us to collect data on things that we've never been able to collect data on before. When the students are working in a digital space, when they're working in a platform that basically collects metrics on everything, you can now see exactly how much time students spend within a document working, all right, or how much time they spend within, when they go into a breakout room, how much time they spend talking with each other and chatting with each other, or what comments they're posting to each other, or what discussions are happening around the learning. We have now data on all of that stuff. There's so much there. But again, does that really tell us about the quality of the instruction? This goes back to this idea of really questioning our assumptions about, what is good teaching? What is effective learning? And, it's more than just a test score. It's more than just the results of one day's assessment, and really starting to think about how we can collect daily engagement data, and we can collect data every single day about what students are learning, about what's happening in classrooms, about what's effective, and what results in better growth. I just think that it's a brave new world as far as what options are available to us, and we just really need to kind of wrap our head around how we can take advantage of of having all this great new information.
I was on mute myself there. Anna.
I feel better now. Thank you.
You're good. It happens to the best of us.
I think I suspect you did that on purpose, Courtney, just to make me look less dumb. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Was really, really nice.
I'm all about you, Frank. I got you. Lee, I'd love to hear kind of your final thoughts as well. Again, I know you guys have been in transition in a couple of areas. I know you guys are doing some really cool things out in your side of the world.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, if it makes you feel better, Frank, I'm not on mute because I forgot to mute myself at the end of the last segment. So good thing I was quiet over here. So, one of the things now that we have this, amazing platform, and we have so much data, I'm sure many of you have heard of the term DRIP, data rich, information poor. What we really need to do on our end is build data literacy capacity within our district from the bottom up. It's really, it's all different groups that really need that. We have all this information now. What are we going to do with it to really make meaningful decisions to really help support our students. And tying back to, we can have all the data in the world as how do we really truly measure if our students are actually learning in the classroom, and that's where the formative assessments that teachers are doing in the classrooms every day, are so important. And so they can kind of get that snapshot and be able to help kiddos as they go. As we're moving forward, we're just about getting ready to launch our annual SEL survey to our students. And we really grappled this year. Do we give it earlier? Do we give it at our normal time, which is in November? And we really thought, okay, well, it's probably better if we keep it at our normal time. As much as we want to know how our kids are doing coming back from summer, we always worry about over surveying, our students and our families and our teachers for that matter. And we really wanted students to be able to get comfortable in their current setting where they are and with their teachers, because we thought, the data might be maybe skewed, coming into a brand new school year with a brand new teacher where maybe those connections aren't as easily made because it is virtual and not in person. And so we're excited to launch that, and in a month or so, get those results back and into the Hanuit platform. And one of the things that we were looking at the other day is how it is displayed and how meaningful it would be to us to be able to see a year side by side, not only for the aggregate data, but for the student level responses that we have in there. So we can really look at every child and see, excuse me, how they responded in the prior year as opposed to this year. And we really think that's going to be able to give us some really good information on how to support individual students. We have lots of support for our students across our district through our student services division, and counseling and resources and different organizations where they can get support. But at the same time, not everybody reaches out on their own, and so those results are so important. And rather than flipping back and forth from 2018 or 1920 to 1921, rather than having to change the settings, for every single student, we really would love to see that on maybe the student profile side by side, or just as a suggestion, so that we can look at it in a much more efficient manner to really be able to help our individual kiddos who may not be reaching out for support, or whose families aren't reaching out for support. Students may have a different idea of what they need right now, or what perceptions that they're not even sharing with their family members, so they can reach out. And that's the whole purpose of doing these SEL surveys. So moving forward, that's going to be a large part of our planning as the results come in, and really focusing on our kids and what their needs are, and why they're not engaging. And I mean, to get the data of are they engaging, yeah, that's easy now, fortunately. But knowing the reasons why and knowing what we can do to help them is a whole nother level. But at least now we have the ability to be able to access that, to be able to help our kids at a whole nother level that we perhaps never were able to before. So we're really happy about that, and happy about our partnership with Hanuit and all the amazing customizations that you continue to make for us, so that we can look at data the way we want. So that's been helpful. That will be helpful for us.
Awesome. Yeah. And we should chat, because I have some ideas too, because we could actually just pre-pop for you the kids that dropped from year to year. So I'll email you.
Cool.
Yeah, no, and again, and I'm similar to Sarah. I tend to, I get really excited about districts that are doing cool new things and come up with great ideas. So when we talk about that partnership with Inuit, that's truly genuine from our side. We'd love to learn. And as things are shifting, many of you know, we reach out all the time, whether you're still in PM mode or whether or not you've transitioned over to Sarah's team for customer success, or you're working with me in some stage of training and end user piece. We want to hear what's working and what those things are, so that we can share the wealth with others and, continually, again, make sure that we're providing what you need to be able to accomplish the goals you have set as a system. So I really appreciate Lee and Frank, you guys being able to give us a glimpse into your world and the world of your teachers and your students and your communities. So we appreciate, talking in front of a larger group is not always easy. So thank you for jumping out today and taking the risk. And then I think Andrea has some things to wrap us up for the rest of today.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you again to Lee and Frank for sharing their district stories. And thank you to the audience for your great engagement and sharing your own insight. We hope you left today with, or you leave today with just a little something to bring back to your district and think about looking at data in a new way. If you do have questions for our special guests or who knew it in general or your data advisor, definitely feel free to pop those into the Q&A. We're happy to use our last few minutes today to address those. We do have, I believe Emma from Tempe asked a question just around, or made a comment more on kind of reacting to Frank's thoughts around communication. So we'll definitely take that back and maybe build that into content that could go into a future Infinite Insight session, or a good blog post where we can share some tips. So I'm definitely glad that resonated. Charles Wilson from Kern also asked about what iReady is going to look like in the system. And I think Lee and the Desert Sands teams it's still a little premature for how that's going to play out. But we do have some good examples and demo. So I think we probably don't have time to pop into the system today, but Charles will definitely, Dave, we can kind of collaborate and maybe show that. There's some interesting ways that can manifest itself in the assessment dashboard itself. There's some really cool things we could do with data walls and kind of skill and standards granularity that iReady provides. So definitely would love to have a follow-up conversation on that. I don't think I see any other questions.
We can add that to our Monday agenda for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Courtney. Awesome. Well, I want to give a quick plug to some future events. So for these sessions, we've fallen into a really nice kind of monthly cadence. We're likely going to combine our November and December events together just with the kind of craziness of the holidays, and we want to be respectful of your time. So look for an invite on one more session that'll come out kind of the beginning of December. And then we're already starting to build our calendar for 2021. So be sure to share any topic ideas that you have with us. I also, again, want to thank Lee and Frank for being brave today, and want to encourage you to think about sharing your story and participating. I think whenever we do for a call for topics, we always get back, I want to hear what other districts are doing. And I know I spoke with some of you that are on the call directly or via email that were kind of apprehensive to be panelists, or you felt like it was too early in your journey. And I think you'll be happy to know that many of our districts are in the early stages of their data journey. And that's really a kind of a super valuable part of the process is sharing that experience. So, as who knew it, we've experienced tremendous growth over the last 18 to 24 months. We've actually doubled the number of districts and agencies that we're working with. So I'm confident that there's a number of other customers that are experiencing some of the same elements in their implementations and in their data work in general. So encourage you guys to reconsider that and kind of sharing some of your thoughts and asking those questions of the audience. So I know one topic suggestion too that we're looking at is kind of implementation 101 for some of those newer customers. So really diving into some of the technical pieces of getting the data in. We've had lots of questions around dashboard configuration, training users. I know a big topic today was just around kind of next steps around data strategy and building culture. So we hope to bring all of those great ideas into our 2021 calendar. And we encourage you guys, as in the follow-up emails, to send session ideas our way. So I'll take one more look at questions. Doesn't look like there's anything more. So I think we'll wrap up a few moments early today. So again, thank you for your time. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Don't hesitate to reach out to your data advisor to explore any ideas that you saw today and how those we could bring those to life in your system. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.